Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We worried about the future, right?
Fraser Valley farmers try to mop up after massive rain across BC.
It's a lot of bad memories, lots of stress, anxiety.
While memories of catastrophic flooding linger. Plus, a fourth person has now died after that helicopter crash near Terrace. He's been identified as the group's heli-skiing guide. And a Vancouver man is charged with murder in the killing of a woman in Manitoba almost 17 years later.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. It was a very wet weekend for most people across southwestern BC. Another atmospheric river brought up to 200 millimeters of rain. It flooded some fields in the Fraser Valley, and as Michelle Gomez shows us, farmers there are bracing themselves for more damage.
You can see that the plant's roots were covered.
For blueberry farmer Harry Sadu, rain in the forecast brings stress. His fields in the Sumas Prairie were submerged in water after heavy rain Saturday, and he says his family farm is still recovering from the catastrophic floods of November 2021.
It's a lot of bad memories, lots of stress, anxiety, and a lot of the other producers feel the same way.
And he won't be able to tell the damage until the spring.
Well, when fields are submerged underwater, you see some of these fields that were replanted. It starts to cause issues with the roots, impacting that root rot or cane diseases. And these are things that are going to come up in the latter months. It's just the risk of the unknown.
Jaswant Dillon's blueberry farm in the Sumas Prairie was also submerged under 2 feet of water Sunday.
If a plant die, we can't afford.
Dillon just planted new blueberries last year after his crops were destroyed in 2021. He says this weekend brought the worst flooding he's seen since.
We worried about the future, right? If rain tomorrow, right? And we flood again.
Are you stressed about this coming?
Yes, too much. The whole family.
Although the Fraser Valley received a break from the rain on Monday, it's expected to return and persist over the next few days.
We hope that the impacts are not catastrophic. We are not expecting them to look anything like what we saw in 2021.
The River Forecast Center had issued a flood warning for the Sumas River, but downgraded it Sunday as water levels receded.
Constantly have this overhang of a flood coming. We're still in that recovery mode. We haven't recovered, and to go through this process again, I don't have the words to explain it. It's very difficult.
In the coming days, farmers like Dillon and Sadu will be anxiously watching the skies. Michelle Gomez, CBC News, Abbotsford.
Science and climate specialist Darius Madavi now has our first look at the weather. What can they expect, Darius?
Oh, lots more rain to come. Temperatures are still well above average across BC. So not just here on the south coast, where we have seen temperatures hit 14 degrees here in downtown Vancouver. And that is very unusual. Usually we don't see that temperature until around mid-March. And meanwhile, up on the other side of the province, up in Fort Nelson, Fort St. John, Fort Nelson almost 10 degrees today as their high. So that is well above normal, 25 degrees warmer than usual. Temperatures are expected to start to come back down into the end of this week. And we're starting to get a little bit drier and colder into February. But for now, still lots more rain on the way. You can see our radar for the last 36 hours. I just wanted to show 36 because it really shows you how consistent that rain has been remarkably right through the central parts of the island and into places like the valley, where we have seen some very heavy rainfall, and that is going to continue. The next wave of the atmospheric river is expected to come into the middle of this week. You can see it really pick up there Tuesday into Wednesday, and you can see very high rainfall amounts expected once again for the west coast of the island, but particularly more central parts. And if we zoom in here in Metro Vancouver, really depends where you are, how much rain you can expect to see over the next 72 hours. Once again, high elevations expecting the most. We'll take a closer look at the accumulations that we've already seen across the south coast later this hour. But for now, just expect that tonight throughout Metro Vancouver, we're going to see that rain start again late tonight and continue into early tomorrow morning before Tuesday is a bit more of a calm day until that rain picks up again overnight into Wednesday.
Okay, Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
A fourth person has now died after that helicopter crash north of Terrace last week. Northern Escape Heli-Skiing says Lewis Ainsworth, the group's heli-skiing guide, has now died from injuries he sustained in that crash. Ainsworth was also president of the New Zealand Mountain Guide Association. Family and friends shared their grief on social media, and a celebration of life was held for him in Vancouver today. Northern Escape heliskiing also named pilot Mark McGowan, who died in the crash. 3 other passengers who survived remain in stable condition. The cause is still unknown, but the Transportation Safety Board, the RCMP, and other authorities are looking into what happened. Avalanche Canada, meanwhile, is reporting high avalanche risk in many parts of our province. That includes the Sea to Sky corridor, the Duffy Lake area, the north and central coast, and much of the Rockies, as you can see. The south coast is expected to see more heavy rain combined with melting snow due to the latest atmospheric river. You are advised not to travel in the alpine of those mountain areas. A Vancouver man has now been arrested and charged in the killing of a Métis woman in Manitoba 17 years later. Mounties say advancements in DNA technology helped them crack the case. And as Cameron McIntosh reports, it may help solve other unsolved cases as well.
And we're continually reassessing and reworking files.
This time, Manitoba RCMP say it paid off. A second-degree murder charge against this man, 42-year-old Kevin Charles Q, for the April 2007 murder of Crystal Saunders, a Métis woman whose body was found in a ditch in rural Manitoba after she was last seen getting into a vehicle at this Winnipeg intersection.
This is a really good case to say 17 years later we didn't give up.
RCMP say in 2014, DNA found with Saunders' body got a match with another sample at the National DNA Data Bank in Ottawa, thanks to advancements in technology. That led them to Q.
Some very complex investigative techniques that I can't divulge here right now. They're very sensitive, but that gave us the evidence to put this over the edge.
Over the years, Saunders became just another in a long list of cold cases involving Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people. That has created tension and mistrust between Indigenous communities and police.
Yes, this is good news. It's going to have some ripple effects, but also I think that what you're going to see is that families will have a sense of hope, but also coupled with frustration.
I just want all the families to understand and know that we do have a lot of work ahead of us. And it takes a lot of effort and flexibility and time by our investigators, but we're not going to give up.
Cameron McIntosh reporting tonight. A suspect arrested after a man was killed in East Vancouver over the weekend has now been charged. Vancouver police say 39-year-old Dwight William Kamach is charged with second-degree murder. Officers were called to a home on Knight Street and 33rd Avenue early Sunday morning. Police arrested the suspect at the scene. The victim has been identified as 31-year-old Alexander Lowe of Vancouver. BC is now stopping any new post-secondary institutions from accepting international students for the next 2 years. The government says it's going to try to address ongoing concerns of students being exploited and left at schools that don't give them quality education. Other changes include inspections to ensure quality standards are met, higher standards for private degree programs, and tuition transparency. The provincial government is also setting a minimum language requirement to ensure students are prepared before they come to BC.
Government does have a role to play, given that they provide student visas, but the provincial government has a role as well to ensure that students are getting a quality education, making sure that there are appropriate supports. And so together we'll address some of the challenges that we've been hearing about with international education.
The pause on international student acceptance is now in effect until February of 2026. The province and the city of Nanaimo are promising more housing in that city. They're planning to fund 100 temporary beds there. But as Claire Palmer reports, the plan does have critics.
A promise to house more people, that's what BC's Minister of Housing and the Mayor of Nanaimo are acting upon after signing a Memorandum of Understanding. It outlines plans to fund 100 temporary housing beds.
We need more housing units. So with this MOU being formalized, it establishes a shared vision, but it also establishes some additional housing opportunities.
What is being announced today in the signing of this memorandum is a recognition that there are human beings, our fellow citizens, who are living in our streets in a 21st century modern liberal democracy, and that is no longer acceptable.
The MOU is a part of the Heart and Hearth programs and clarifies the roles of both the province and city in coordinating outreach and programs. BC Housing has leased space at 1300 Island Highway South for 50 beds. The other 50 beds will be located at Newcastle Place.
That's what today is about. It's about getting people stability and supports and getting them indoors.
Not everyone is pleased with the announcement today.
We were promised that this site would be made into a full-time, permanent, properly built residential supported housing facility. So what they're looking at here is, let's clean up the community and make it into a flop house again for the next 3 years. So that's why I'm mad as hell this morning.
For some, the issue is that it's too little too late and not quite what the community needs.
I think it's quite challenging that we continue to be given, these little tid pieces of performative offerings that, again, I just don't see us making a big stamp on what the need is.
Mayor Krogh says that the commitment to permanent housing at Newcastle remains, although he says it will take time. Meanwhile, Nanaimo is now the 4th community in BC to sign on to the Heart and Hearth program, behind Prince George, Abbotsford, and Kelowna. Approximately $9 million in funding will go to these projects across those 4 cities. Claire Palmer, CBC News, Nanaimo.
For the past 4 years, a not-for-profit in New Westminster has been feeding people in need twice a week. But now with rising rent and growing operational costs, that food bank may be forced to shut down. As Janella Hamilton reports, it comes at a time when food insecurity in our province is at an all-time high.
Mohammed Amin Ahmadi tries to sort through boxes of donated food in this small space he rents from a local church.
There's too much stuff, not enough space, unfortunately.
He says Hope Omid, a grassroots food bank he started with his family during the pandemic, is seeing more and more people line up for food hampers.
At least 150 family per week, minimum, we provide the food. Right now, so day by day, we need bigger. More people is coming, no space.
The mayor of New Westminster says today thousands of people who live in the city rely on food banks.
Incomes are not keeping up with inflation right now. That's a big thing across the city, especially people who are suffering with poverty or living on low incomes. They're not being able to keep up with their bills. They're not able to keep up with the cost of living.
Jim Goring has been volunteering with Hope Omid for 2 years.
I think it's important to not be judgmental about why anybody needs food or food banks, and we all could be there.
Ahmadi says the small food bank has started to see an influx of families and working professionals struggling to make ends meet. That financial pressure also being felt by Ahmadi himself. He's been paying thousands of dollars out of pocket in operating costs at both the food bank and this nonprofit thrift store he opened in 2018 to help newcomers to Canada.
Right now, unfortunately, we cannot afford the rent. No choice, we need to close this store. Of course, I'm very, very sad.
He says right now there is a greater need to help feed people in the community.
Almost 90% is good. 10% maybe is expired.
So he will try to keep the food bank afloat as long as possible.
If we cannot find a sponsor, maybe we make a little bit smaller. No, I never be give up.
Janella Hamilton, CBC News, New Westminster.
As dry January comes to an end for some people, how are they finding a balance between maintaining good habits and enjoying themselves? After the break, Dr. Melissa Lem has some advice for you. Stick around. And hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. The province is exploring the idea of allowing single stairwell apartment building under BC's building code. As Claire Palmer explains, it's a move experts say could help make affordable housing easier and quicker to build.
Single egress buildings like these remove the main hallway that is a part of most conventional North American buildings. Experts say that removing this will help manage cost, and the province is hoping this will help build affordable housing faster.
This is a really great opportunity to address multiple priorities, most importantly managing cost, but also addressing climate and affecting beauty and social interaction opportunities inside a building.
Most apartment building layouts in North America are hotel style, with a central corridor and a fire exit on either side. This requires a large building footprint with multiple lots and makes developments more complex to construct. Yute Lee is a content creator and sits on the board of BC Housing. He says that the hotel-style layout contributes to a shortage of multi-bedroom apartments while favoring one-bedroom and studio units.
And this shortage of family-friendly apartments is where I really see the potential of point access block buildings.
The advantage of single-stair buildings, which are allowed in cities like Seattle and New York City, would be smaller projects that are more feasible for multi-resident homes. Some say this design could mean an increased fire risk. However, Boston says that's based on outdated ideas of fire security.
So what has not happened is we haven't kept up with all of these iterative improvements in strengthening fire prevention. Now what we are seeing the BC government doing is commendably looking at finally updating the building code to allow a single egress.
The request for proposals process will be open to consultants until February 22nd. Clara Palmer, CBC News, Nanaimo.
The COVID-19 pandemic saw a drop in the number of students across Canada. Getting routine vaccines as priorities shifted to COVID protection. Now there's a drive to get those immunizations up to date. As Tashana Reid tells us, students in Ontario who opt out could face consequences.
Across Ontario, a major push. Public health units are still working to get tens of thousands of children and teens up to date on their routine vaccines post-pandemic. It's a requirement to attend school in the province.
The goal is to make sure that our community is safe and we're preventing outbreaks.
In Waterloo, Ontario, Public Health sent notices to 32,000 elementary and high school students to ensure they have their shots for diseases like measles, chickenpox, and whooping cough. Students have a few months to comply or to submit an exemption. If they don't, they face suspension.
We don't want to suspend. We do this process to ensure safety.
The region says they believe majority of the students have had their vaccines, and parents just need to submit the record. Still, they estimate about 5,000 kids are behind. Their clinics are booking more than 300 students each week.
My school said I'll get suspended if I don't. I want to go to school.
6-year-old Akshaj Ravi Rao got one of the notices.
My kid's health is primary priority.
So 2 needles today.
The first 2 years of the pandemic, Ontario saw significant declines in vaccinations among various age groups, and they aren't the only ones playing catch-up. Across the country, pandemic school closures impacted student immunization programs, and public health resources shifted to COVID.
HPV vaccine coverage in the first year of the pandemic plummeted to about 5% of kids getting 2 doses of the vaccine instead of what we typically see, which is around 70% of kids.
In Alberta, vaccines aren't mandatory to attend school, but like many other regions, are making efforts to get coverage rates back to pre-pandemic levels.
What we worry about is that coverage gap getting so large that we can't maintain immunity in the population.
Back in Waterloo, there were a few tears.
How do you feel?
I feel happy and sad.
But for Akshaj, some relief, it's all done. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
Our health columnist, Dr. Melissa Lem, joins us now. Dr. Lem, thanks for being here. Before we get to talking about booze and dry January and February, what are you noticing with your child patients when it comes to vaccines?
I notice in general a lot fewer children, and actually parents are getting flu vaccinations. So I'm seeing more kids and parents coming in with viral infections, including serious flu symptoms.
And what do you tell them? Is it pretty basic? Just get vaccinated?
Yeah, I mean, it's protecting you, it's protecting your family members and people who can't get vaccinated or have chronic diseases who would benefit from protection from the flu vaccine.
And how do most of them respond?
They usually, they take it on board, okay. Yeah, and then because we have a relationship, a patient-physician relationship, typically they say, you know, I think maybe I will go on. So I think it is important to have a family doctor so that you can give them evidence-based information and encourage them.
Absolutely. Now, to our other topic, dry January is almost over. Some people do dry February. Marks the end of a health-conscious sort of time for a lot of people after perhaps an indulgent December, etc. What do you recommend for people who have not been drinking for, let's say, a month and thinking, now maybe I'll indulge again?
Well, the very first thing I say to them when they've gone through dry January is I congratulate them because they've just done something that's been really good for their health. Research does show from the UK that if you stop drinking for 1 month, and if you have been a regular drinker, that you lower your blood pressure, you lose weight, you actually have better energy, better sleep, and actually lower your number of cancer-related proteins. And so what I say is hold on to that feeling of better health that you had during that dry January and then carry those healthy habits forward into the rest of the year.
How truthful do you think people are when you ask them, perhaps during a screening of a new patient, are you a drinker? How often? What's your gauge of how truthful they're being?
Well, there is some stigma around alcohol use. So the research tells us that, in fact, about 50% of men have lied to their doctors about their alcohol use, and about 1/3 of women. And so it's important to be truthful with your doctor because there are all kinds of diseases that are linked to overuse of alcohol, like heart disease, like high blood pressure, liver disease, and stomach issues. So what I try to do is I try to weave in questions about alcohol use with other lifestyle questions like diet and sleep and exercise to try to reduce that stigma and get my patients to open up.
Now, there's been some new research that suggests it's not moderate drinking that causes issues. It's the binge drinking that can be harmful. We've heard some concerns about that over the years. With new data out suggesting Canadians limit their intake, do you worry that people will decide more often, instead of doing moderate drinking, that they'll just have a big go on like a weekend or something?
Do you know what's interesting, Dan, is that changes in binge drinking are, in fact, generational. So lower age groups, 54 and under, in fact, are drinking less often and less binge drinking, whereas, in fact, older adults over 54 are either staying steady with that amount or increasing the amount that they drink. And something else interesting is that regular drinking, in fact, does predict binge drinking. So I think, as we see hopefully fewer younger generations drinking, that we'll see the amount of binge drinking drop as well.
Dr. Melissa Lem, we really appreciate your time and your expertise, as always. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Dan.
The independent inquiry on foreign interference in Canadian elections has begun. The issue at hand, how much classified information can be shared with you? More on the proceedings after this.
My picture. Look at it.
We fix anything you can carry, basically. We don't fix fridges or stoves or cars. We have electrical fixers, small appliances. We have clothing menders. We have jewelry fixers, small furniture, bikes, books, and computers. So pretty much anything. Hi, my name's Paul Magder. I'm a retired electronics technologist. I used to work in manufacturing, building electronic test equipment. When I retired, I was looking for something to do, and one of my family members mentioned Repair Cafe. They'd heard about it. So we looked it up online and found out that there's an international network of repair cafes. Downloaded their starting kits, and that was 10 years ago. And From then, we just took off. In 2019, just before COVID hit, we had done 125 events that year, and we were almost up to 10,000 items repaired since we started. We have now a mailing list of 1,000 volunteers, just like 1,005 or something like that. Basically, we try and fix whatever people bring.
The next thing we're going to do is we're putting a crimp bead.
This was a necklace that I got in Panama over 20 years ago, and it was one of the trips that I took with my mom. And for the last 20 years, it's been sitting in an envelope when it broke. And I thought with the Repair Cafe today, to get it fixed and to be able to wear it again instead of just tossing it out to landfill. It's done. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Wonderful.
My pleasure. The fact you get to use your head and redesign something completely different. That creativity never stops when you get older.
It may work. The real motivation is the people. I've made so many new friends. You meet really interesting people and they're so appreciative, and it's just a really beautiful atmosphere at an event, so that's really what keeps me going.
What a success.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
The independent inquiry looking into foreign interference in Canadian elections is now underway. The focus right now is how to deal with the official secrecy surrounding the issue. As Rafi Boudjikanian tells us, the first goal is to determine how much of the classified information can be made public.
The Commission must examine whether China, Russia, or other actors interfered in the 2019 and 2021 federal elections.
Marie-Josée Hogg kicking off a public inquiry that nearly did not happen, about a subject that last year consumed Parliament Hill for months.
The Prime Minister knew that his own security committee said Beijing had directed funds to candidates in preceding elections.
Allegations like this surfaced after stories primarily by the Globe and Mail and Global News about China favoring Liberal candidates in the last two federal campaigns, or even about a Chinese diplomat in Canada conducting surveillance on family members of Conservative MP Michael Chong, an outspoken critic of Beijing. The federal government's previous appointee to look into the issue, David Johnston, determined that foreign interference had not threatened the integrity of the elections. He also recommended against holding a public inquiry, stating that too much of the evidence he examined would be classified information. Johnston later resigned from his post amid opposition criticism he was too close to the Prime Minister.
The only reason they're doing the inquiry is because the Conservatives demanded it.
But even as the opposition takes that credit now, the Commission warns some 80% of the documents it has collected so far are classified. Part of the reason foreign spies will be watching closely.
These intelligence agencies have massive data banks of information and have the ability to take the crumbs that come out of this inquiry and combine them with that information and draw conclusions.
And that in turn could damage Canadian intelligence gathering, says this former spy.
You may compromise the ability of the service to go on doing that in the future. So that's the challenge. How much of it do you put out? How much of it do you keep secret?
Justice Ugg is also facing criticism from the Conservatives for limiting their participation and from human rights groups for granting politicians they allege have ties to Beijing the right to cross-examine witnesses and view classified documents. The Commission will hear this week from the current head of CSIS and from Canada's Public Safety Minister, all in a bid to figure out how much of this inquiry can indeed be made public. Rafi Bujikani on CBC News, Ottawa.
MPs are back on Parliament Hill today for the start of a new sitting, and the federal government and opposition parties are picking up where they left off. As Olivia Stefanovich reports, housing and the cost of living are top of mind.
Welcome back. In a place where MPs like to point out their differences, all parties are united by one issue.
You know, for us, the NDP, what is the priority right now is the cost of living.
What's the number one issue on your mind?
Affordability.
People are desperate right now.
What they don't agree on, the fix.
In this session of Parliament, we will fight to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
The Conservatives, energized from their widening lead in the polls, continue to blame the governing Liberals for the state of the economy.
It is 2024, and this Prime Minister is still not worth the cost.
It's test time for the federal government, and cabinet ministers are eager to show they're up for the challenge.
Canada needs more student housing, and we're going to help build it.
Announcing low-cost loans to build more student housing.
This is an important policy change. It's not just going to create more affordable places for students to live near where they're going to school. It's also going to relieve pressure on the housing market.
And new measures to relieve that pressure at the grocery aisle, too.
When it comes to the price of food, you can count on us to continue to hold the grocers' feet to the fire.
But the government's dance partner is still unsatisfied.
Our big critique of the Liberal government is they're not focusing on affordability.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is calling for an emergency parliamentary debate on housing and homelessness.
So we're in this crisis and we're calling for an emergency debate so we can force the government to take this seriously, to see some real action, to tackle what is one of the biggest crises that we're up against of our time right now.
With kitchen table issues front and center, the parties are competing against each other to convince Canadians they're the ones who feel their pain and have the solutions to address it. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Ottawa, meanwhile, plans to delay making medically assisted dying available to people whose ailment is mental illness. This comes after a joint parliamentary committee determined the service could not be safely provided yet.
The issue here is, again, not whether or not somebody, look, we're talking about there are people who have for decades been trapped in mental torture, being in a horrific situation where they have tried everything and exhausted all avenues and under their own recognizance are saying that they want access to MAID.
People who support the eligibility expansion say excluding people with mental illness from the program amounts to discrimination. Critics argue there's no clear way to determine that a person suffering from mental illness is beyond treatment. He's 10 years sober, but it did not come easy. After the break, we hear from a man who had to fight to find meaning and wellness in his life. Our Monday Motivation series is next.
It's rare for this car to leave Omar Ahmed's garage. He only takes it out for special events. So he was confused when he started getting bills last year from Highway 407.
I live south of Hamilton, so the 407 is quite a hike from here. Pretty much opened it up and I started looking through it and looking at the plate. I'm like, when was this car even on the 407?
In less than 6 months, those bills have totaled more than $350, all for trips he says he never took. Last month, he discovered what he believes is the culprit when he spotted an ad online selling novelty plates that look exactly like his real plate, which he's had for more than a decade.
Like carbon copy, identical. Like if I put it on my card, nobody will tell the difference. That is a reproduction of my plate.
From Etsy to Amazon to local sellers, there are all kinds of sites online where you can order custom novelty plates with any combination of numbers and letters. You can even copy someone else's plate.
They're so easy to get, we ordered one ourselves. This novelty plate cost us $35 and shipped within hours. The one we chose is an exact match or clone of the real license plate on this CBC News vehicle.
Fake plates like these are tricking cameras and cops.
We have seen some very well disguised fake license plates out there that wouldn't ordinarily catch the eye of an officer or even trick the automatic license plate reading camera to think that this is actually a legitimate license plate.
The 407 says it is aware of cases of duplicated plates. They're among the more than 500 reports of lost or stolen plates the company investigated each month last year. That's more than double the number of cases just 5 years ago. The 407 says it will always reverse charges for fraudulent or stolen license plates. But here's the kicker. Buying or selling a replica plate is perfectly legal. It's only an offense to actually put it on a vehicle. The penalty, a $140 fine under the Highway Traffic Act, or about the same price as a couple of long trips on the 407. And if you're a victim, it's up to you to clean up the mess.
You know, you will have to do some due diligence and some work on your side to prove to the tolling companies or whatever to the courts that this was not in fact my vehicle.
It also means paying $59 to change your plates to ensure you don't get any more wrongful bills.
We asked the Ministry of Transportation why it's legal to buy and sell novelty license plates in Ontario and what's being done to address this issue and deter people from duplicating registered plates. The ministry did not directly answer those questions, but said it does not regulate the sale of novelty license plates. Sarah McMillan, CBC News, Toronto.
So I know when I really like a song, if within the first 3 seconds, I'm already vibing to it.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond.
It's not one person dictating what good music is, it's the community sharing what good music is.
Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
The Columbia Wetlands in BC's East Kootenay are drying up, leaving migrating birds with far fewer options to rest and feed during long journeys. As Corey Bullock tells us, a group of stewards, though, is trying to fix that.
Standing on the edge of the Columbia Wetlands near Invermere, Katrina Levin explains how she's building beaver dams.
We go out and we get very muddy is the first step. We're trying to do it sort of low-key and as naturally as possible.
Beavers have long since left the western upland area at the base of the Purcell Mountains for reasons unknown. Their once beneficial dams left unmaintained, causing water to flow up and over, creating a stream where the wetland once was. Something Levin and a team of others are working to change with these man-made dams.
So that recharges the groundwater, that provides all kinds of habitat for organisms that live there, so higher biodiversity. And actually they even provide fire breaks in a lot of areas. So what happens, a fire will come up to that wetland and then stop.
According to Living Lakes Canada, certain areas of the Columbia Wetlands have lost over 16% of permanent open water in the last few decades. It's one of the largest remaining intact wetlands in North America and a vital habitat for a variety of animal species. But approximately 40% of this floodplain remains unprotected.
Work has been done on these wetlands for many years, but what's happening now is the exacerbation of the cumulative impacts through climate change.
It's getting warmer, it's getting drier. It has been doing it for the last 40 years, and it's accelerating.
The wetlands span 26,000 hectares, stretching from Canal Flats up past Golden for about 150 kilometers and attract over 160 types of migrating birds.
I've definitely identified that the wetlands that have water in the spring and the fall are where the migratory water birds are. So in the future going forward, I think that is definitely a concern that we're losing water in the whole system, so we're going to be losing habitat for these species.
The group is hopeful that copying the work of the industrious beaver will help fix that.
I can go out and build this beaver dam and it's going to make a wetland. So at the end of the day, I'm going to see this massive difference and hopefully see some wildlife move into the area and able to use it. So,
just one way that these land stewards are working to keep this vital system running and hopefully return to a more thriving ecosystem. Corey Bullock, CBC News in Vermeer.
Darius Madavi joins us now with a full BC-wide forecast as we get ready for whatever round number this is of rain.
2, 3, so it depends what you count exactly, because the first one we got on Friday, last Friday, the first round of this atmospheric river didn't really properly hit the south coast, but definitely we still felt those impacts. It was very wet. If this is going to play, there we go. We definitely felt those impacts here along the south coast with some heavy rainfall already picking up then, but then the really big one hit Sunday. We saw that really extremely heavy rainfall across much of the south coast, and now our next one, and hopefully the last, will be the last, is coming overnight tomorrow night into Wednesday. So we'll still see some very heavy rainfall, not quite as bad as it was on Sunday, but still definitely coming, and those really warm temperatures will persist before they start to fall again next week, because not only did that atmospheric river bring us that moisture from Hawaii, it also brought us the heat. Now again, last 36 hours, we saw some extremely heavy and extremely consistent rainfall, particularly over the central parts of the island and at high elevations here on the lower mainland. That is expected to happen once again on Wednesday. If you take a look at our forecast, you'll notice a bit of a gap on Tuesday where things are about as calm as they're going to be over the next few days before it really hits again on Wednesday, and we see again some very heavy rainfall, but slightly less sustained than it has been. And then on Thursday, you started to see a little bit more of that snowfall as those temperatures do start to come back down. Freezing levels expected to start to drop again on Thursday. And so Wednesday, we still see this freezing level over 2,000 meters. By Thursday and Friday even. Friday is really going to drop down to back below 1,000 meters. So that means snow possible again for the local mountains. Now, in terms of accumulation, this is actually going from Friday to Monday. You can see Thursday to Monday, actually. You can see some very heavy buildup, particularly on parts of the south coast, where we got over 300 millimeters, 400 millimeters of rain in some areas. So the highest recorded at a weather station was 400 millimeters just further inland and higher elevation than Tofino, but very heavy rainfall even in these areas close to the water. Here across BC, you can see over the next 72 hours, plenty of rain coming. Snow only really for the northwest and then those high mountain tops. And if we zoom into the south coast, you can see lots more rain coming, particularly for places like Tofino, even over on Campbell River on the east coast. And zooming into Vancouver once more, you can see still, depending really on where you are and your elevation, that's going to determine how much snow you do get. And in terms of conditions over the next few days, relatively calm, particularly in the south, except for the exception of the coast. But again, it is our most calm period over the next few days. And then lastly, our forecast is still very consistent, but then we get a bit of a change this weekend.
No kidding. Thanks very much, Darius.
Thank you.
In Kamloops, Day One Society offers free meals to people on the road to recovery following a struggle with addiction. Some gained close to 10 pounds in the first week. They talked with us about the healing power of food for people going through detox.
Hi, my name is Nancy Eld, and I'm the finance manager at Day One Society. I mean, when they first come in, of course, the last thing they want to do is eat because they're feeling so unwell as they are withdrawing from their substances. But, once they start to feel better, they really appreciate the home-cooked meals that we provide here.
My name is Vicki Siebold's, and I'm the lead cook in the kitchen at Day One Society. So for them to come in and have healthy meals on a, constant basis while they're here, it really makes them feel way better. And you can see it too, from the time they come in to the time they leave, how much better they're feeling.
My name is Arlene Christensen, and I'm the second cook in the kitchen. I love soup. Homemade soup of any kind, I love. It's one of the things that makes a person just feel better when you have it, right? It's like a hot hug. I don't know. That's what I think anyway. It's so comforting, and most of our clients I'm going to say their average weight gain while they're here is anywhere from 7 to 15 pounds in a week, because some of them come in and they're really underweight, or just are not eating the right healthy foods out there. So we do our best to give them a healthy, nourishing meal.
It's now time for another in our series called Motivation Monday, or Monday Motivation. Today we're introducing you to Stu Barrington-Foote, who's celebrating a big anniversary this year, 10 years sober. Host Suman Condola tells us how he lost everything in his fight for wellness and meaning.
I'm Suman Condola, and the past few years of uncertainty and chaos have left me deeply unmotivated and made me lose my zest for life. As somebody who is genuinely curious and inquisitive about the world and the people in it, this was really hard for me to digest. So I knew something needed to change, and that's how Monday Motivation was born. Monday Motivation explores the tenacity and champion mindset behind everyday people experiencing the fight of their lifetime. So come with me as I borrow some hope, courage, and perspective from brave and inspiring individuals. Meet Stu, an adventurous and community-driven soul who's celebrating 10 years sober. Stu's path shows us that despite the love, support, and privilege someone may have, they can still lose everything that matters most to them to an addiction. As somebody who believed that he would just one day wake up with the life of his dreams, he now co-creates a reality he's proud of living. This is his story.
My name's Stu, and I've been clean since December 19th, 2012.
What got you into your addiction?
People have asked me that, like, was I trying to escape something? But not really. Like, I had everything I could ask for. And it's not like I had any well, at least my idea of a precursor to addiction or substance use or anything like that. Like, I really stand by, especially in high school years, I liked getting high, and I liked the thrill of it. I guess like kind of grade 10, where it's like I'm using all kinds of substances, heavily going through school and kind of just scraping by school. And then I think what really started more of a downhill in grade 11, I got expelled from my first high school and really changed all my friend group to people who were using drugs. The idea of going to university, getting a real job, that went out the window. I was living in an apartment in North Van because my parents couldn't handle me anymore. It's like there'd be times where I like really started to kind of go like, I don't want to do this, I want to stop. Like the kind of stuff where it's like, this is the last night, I'm not going to do this again. And then like an hour later, I'd be driving to my dealer's house, or I'd throw everything out and be like, that's it, I'm done. And then trying to find what I threw out kind of stuff. Just going like, why can't you stop? Why are you doing this? Stop. Like this is going to go bad, and you know it's going to go bad. My dad and mom were very successful. In my head, I don't know how I thought this, that someday I would just wake up with that stuff. Like it would just somehow this would change, that it wasn't like I'm stuck doing this. And there was a lot of years like that I just thought I'd wake up with a career. I'd wake up with a family, I'd wake up with a house, I'd wake up with the things I'd want. And this is just something I'm doing. I was about $130. Skinny as hell, pale skin. I remember just sitting there and just like bawling my eyes out thinking I'm done. So I did what any grown man would do. I texted my mom and asked for help and saying like, hey, I'm done, I need help. I stayed clean for about 10 months and ended up relapsing. And then the relapse was way worse.
Than before?
Than way before, yeah. Prior to, like I had a full-time job. My parents were being a little bit codependent and paying my rent and my phone bill and my car insurance and probably putting gas and food in my fridge. You know, keeping me alive long enough, but they just don't want me in their house kind of thing. But this time I didn't have that. So I didn't have the free rent. I didn't have the supply of drugs. I didn't be able to go to their house and steal money. So it was way more of a grind. Really, the consequences that led me to getting clean was more of kind of like an emotional bottom. It wasn't like, hey, throughout my teenage years, yes, I got arrested a number of times. There was a few times I had to go to court for like petty things, like possession and some other things. But it wasn't like I had an overdose or jail time or really bad car accident or anything like that. More the consequences I would think would be kind of like, I don't have a relationship with my family. My sister and I don't talk. My brother and I don't talk. My parents are scared of what's going on. I don't like myself. I was trying to stop using heroin and I tried everything but like quitting kind of thing. Like I remember waking up and withdrawals from opiates, it's horrible. It's called being dope sick. And I remember it was like really the first time I had gotten actually sick. So not only am I know that I'm physically dependent and I don't want to do it anymore, but I have to. And then also thinking I'm not gonna get an education. I'm not gonna be traveling. I'm not gonna ever have a family. I'm never gonna have a dog. I'm never gonna have some of these things. And also, I at this point now hate myself. There comes December 19th, 2012 is when I went back to treatment for the second time. It's like some of the things that people do in addiction, it can be super shameful, right? Like you could tell something to maybe a normal individual out there and be like, what's wrong with you? kind of thing. And then be able to share it with like your peers and say like, yeah, I get that, I had it too. Like, yeah, you tanked it as a son. You weren't the brother you want to be. You weren't the friend you want to be. It's like, do you want to be stuck in that and be a victim to it and sit in the feelings that go with it? Or do you want to do something different and change? So it wasn't about just getting to a place of being like scared of relapsing. It was like finding ways where it's like to counter it, like finding a life that's more enjoyable, finding friends, finding meaning, building better relationships, repairing the relationships with my family. I finished treatment in 5 months, volunteered at the youth program, and then they hired me on as a support worker. My mentors at the time, a lot of them were just talking about like the excitement of life and how important that is, that if you're not having fun clean, what's the point? Not that every day clean is fun, not that every day in recovery, whether you're an addict or non-addict, like life is life and stuff happens, but what's the point if you're not having fun with it?
Is there something that you've said or someone has said to you when it comes to making that shift or in recovery that's really empowered you or someone else?
I just come back from a relapse. I'm sitting intaking back into treatment. And a person I really look up to, and she sits down beside me and she's like, oh, how's it going, Stu? It's so good to see you, what's new? And I'm like, well, I'm intaking back into treatment. She stops for a second, thinks about it and says, well, I'm sorry you did that to yourself. So many people have said that, like my dad, my mom, my siblings, coaches, counselors, judges, my lawyer, all this type of stuff have said like, you're putting yourself in this position, or in other words it is. But it's the first time where I really internalized this, where it's like, yeah, I've put myself here, and I have the ability to take myself out of here. It's like when I was 16 or 15, and thinking, one day I'm gonna wake up with stuff. It's like, no, I have to put the work in. It's the same thing for anything else. I want to keep my relationship. I have to put the work into it. If I want to be a dog owner, I have to take him out even at 2 in the morning when he wants to go to the bathroom. If I want to keep my job, there's work involved. I got to get up, I got to go to work. And it was just the first time where it's like, yeah, I have the ability to take responsibility for this. I have the ability to take responsibility for my life. And it doesn't have to be a suffer. It doesn't have to be a grind, but I can enjoy it.
Yeah,
right?
Radical responsibility is beautiful.
Coming up, abandoned malls across the country could soon be revitalized by a growing racket sport. You know what it is. That's next.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
This is Vancouver Island is the brand new podcast that explores stories of island life. Each week, host Catherine Marlowe looks at the joys and challenges of living on the island. Subscribe on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. And BC Today is the call-in show where British Columbians make their voices heard. And now you can watch it on television, stream it on CBC Gem, and hear it on CBC Radio 1 and CBC Listen.
After a 4-year hiatus, the Sonny Samuelson bobsled race returned to Rossland over the weekend for the Winter Carnival.
There they go. Thrill seekers grouped into fours barreled down the 4-block stretch of town in their homemade bobsleds, hitting speeds of up to 60 kilometers an hour. Carnival organizers say the race was parked for a few years while they looked at insurance options and addressed safety issues. Now worked out, some multi-generational sledders were happy to renew the family tradition, including the crew that won.
My dad and his team built it in 1988 when it got brought back. It took a 20-year hiatus. I think it didn't run for 20 years. It came back in 1988. They built the sled and started running it then.
It's been a hard row, but I'm super excited about all the people that helped and contributed to making the track run, because it was slushy, but it got faster and faster. In fact, my team did not win today. This team to the other side did win, and they were running fast.
He says people have been running sleds in Rossland for more than 100 years, and despite the slushy conditions, they still put on a show for close to 1,000 spectators, nearly a third of the community.
Looks like good fun. So, pickleball, if you don't know, has soared in popularity in recent years, and that has players fighting for court time, among other things.
As Jamie Strachan reports, some Ontario malls are being repurposed to create more places to play.
I'm trying to put it in that square there.
At this Toronto area pickleball club, space is always at a premium. Too many players and not enough courts. It's housed in an old hockey arena whose full-time tenant is actually a badminton club.
The badminton club takes 3 quarters of the time. We only have 8 to 12 Monday to Friday. And it's really not enough time.
Finding space to play is an issue across the country for a sport that until a few years ago few had even heard of. In 2023, Pickleball Canada estimates about 1 million people played at least once a month.
It's such a social game, and you get to meet people, and it's a very easy game to play. It's an extremely hard game to play well.
The game is like a miniature version of tennis, played with paddles and a harder, less bouncy ball, and has been especially attractive to older athletes, like this 93-year-old club regular.
Every time I hit a nice shot, I feel good about it.
That appeal is driving creative efforts to find more space.
I've never seen a sport sort of enter the cultural conversation like pickleball has in the last couple of years.
At this suburban Toronto mall, a vast retail space that used to house a Target store will soon be home to 9 new pickleball courts. The company behind this one says plans are underway to do the same at other malls in the GTA and Vancouver. The hope? To breathe life into dormant spaces with a new reason to visit the mall.
I think there's definitely a supply and demand opportunity right now. Where are people playing pickleball outside of the YMCAs? We've heard church basements converting. This is just going to fit what people are looking for.
Players won't have club fees, just pay by the hour, and access to a restaurant and bar would be part of the design.
I think a perfect night is having all the courts full. I think the music blasting. I think people laughing.
An emerging sport revitalizing unused space, reaching a new demographic, and giving people more places to play. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
It's a good use of space. You ever played pickleball?
2 times. It's very loud.
Very loud.
Very loud. Yeah, and you're going to meet some people that are real intense about it.
Silly name. Looks fun, though. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. See you then.